Hello and welcome to Raw Oceans. I'm Jules Powis. This week we take a closer look at plastics in our seas and the potential solutions. In 1998, oceanographer Charles Moore was sailing across the North Pacific when he made a discovery. He wrote about it in Natural History magazine. As I gazed from the deck at the surface of what ought to have been a pristine ocean, I was confronted, as far as the eye could see, with the sight of plastic. It seemed unbelievable, but I never found a clear spot. In the week it took to cross the subtropical high, no matter what time of day I looked, plastic debris was floating everywhere. Bottles, bottle caps, wrappers, fragments. What he stumbled on became known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is thought to be anywhere between the size of Texas, 270,000 square miles, to several times that size. It's one of the 5 ocean gyres on our planet that I briefly mentioned last week. Some of the plastic litter is found hovering at the waterline, but most of it is floating in the upper water column over thousands of square miles in the Indian, Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. By some estimates, the ratio of plastic to zooplankton in these gyres is around 6:1 by weight. At the core of the vortex, this can be as high as 48:1. Zooplankton is an important component of the ocean ecosystem, providing nourishment for the smallest fish to the biggest whales, meaning much of the microplastic matter ends up being ingested and finding its way up the food chain. Perhaps most alarmingly for people who eat fish on a regular basis, scientists recently found microplastics in the bodies of fish, not just their stomachs. Last month, a group of Malaysian and French scientists found 36 pieces of potentially harmful microplastics in a study of 120 mackerel, mullet, anchovies and croakers. Described as a ticking time bomb by marine scientists, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is believed to have grown by 5 times in the past 10 years and will become a greater risk to life as the plastics degrade further. The result of a 3-year mapping effort by international scientists published on the 22nd of March in the journal Nature revealed that the amount of plastic this garbage patch contains is up to 16 times greater than previously thought. So, let's take a look at this avalanche of plastic, how much of it there is, and where it comes from. Around 8 million tons of plastic enter our oceans each year, the equivalent of dumping a truck full of plastic into the sea every minute. That's 5 grocery bags filled with plastic for every foot of coastline in the world, and increasing all the time. More than 86 million metric tons of plastic is thought to be in the oceans right now, clogging reefs, killing wildlife and littering shores. The amount of plastic in the ocean is set to triple in the next decade. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation estimates that the volume of plastic waste in our oceans will outweigh the total mass of fish by 2050. Once in the ocean, much of this plastic is pulled into huge areas known as the 5 gyres, one of which is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where circular currents allow the trash to accumulate, circulate, and slowly break down. As well as containing larger items, the garbage patch is also made up of microplastics. These are pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters in size, and at the moment they're thought to comprise around 8% of its total mass. Much of our older marine waste is now breaking down into more toxic and hard to remove substances, and reaching parts of the sea previously thought to be pristine. Even the deepest chasm on Earth's surface, the Mariana Trench in the Western Pacific, has been found to contain extraordinary levels of pollution at depths of 10 kilometers below sea level. So where is all this plastic waste coming from? A study published in Nature back in June 2017 showed that 86% of marine plastic is coming from Asia and from a relatively small number of rivers in those areas. Of the world's top 20 plastic-carrying rivers, 7 are in China, sending about 2/3 of all river plastics into the sea. The worst river is the Yangtze, which flows through Shanghai and contributes about 22,000 metric tons of plastic into the ocean every year. India's Ganges is number 2, followed by China's Zi River. Part of the problem is economic, since residents of wealthier nations have their rubbish picked up and removed to a landfill that at least keeps most of it out of the ocean. In poorer communities, such as those along long Asian coastlines, there is no such option. Rubbish ends up on the ground or into local rivers and so out to sea. At a UN Ocean Summit in 2017, delegates from China, Thailand, Indonesia and the Philippines promised to do more to keep their plastics out of the sea. The NGO Ocean Conservancy estimates it would take about $4.5 billion annually to overhaul the insufficient disposal infrastructure of China alone. There's no clear source for that kind of money. We shouldn't feel hopeless about marine plastics, though. There's still plenty of it entering our oceans that we in the West can do something about. When I walk along the southwest coast path in Cornwall in the UK, it's not Chinese plastics I see littering the coastline. It's stuff like cotton buds that have been flushed down the toilet. We have a creaking Victorian sewer system in the UK that relies on something called the combined sewer overflow. These are sewers that are designed to collect rainwater runoff, domestic sewage and industrial wastewater in the same pipe. They are supposed to transport all of their wastewater to a sewage treatment plant, where it is treated and then discharged clean into a local river. However, most of these systems are very old and haven't been expanded in line with population growth, with the result that when it rains heavily, the sewer frequently overflows and discharges all of its untreated sewage and industrial waste directly out to sea. Download the Surfers Against Sewage app to see how often your local pipe discharges like this, and it'll be more often than you think. In the UK, we need to put pressure on our water companies to invest more in updating their infrastructure. If you don't have time for all that, then putting cotton buds, wet wipes and feminine hygiene products in the bin instead of down the loo is a good start. Picking up litter off a beach may seem like a peripheral activity, but almost 7,000 people took part in the Great British Beach Clean in September 2017. Together, they removed 500,000 pieces of litter from 339 beaches. That's 718 pieces of litter for every 100-metre stretch of beach cleaned. That's not plastic waste from China, that's British litter that would have gone into the ocean. The International Coastal Cleanup began more than 30 years ago. Volunteers from more than 100 countries come together each year and participate in local cleans, collecting over £18 million of rubbish last year. Even if we stopped all plastic from entering the ocean tomorrow, there is an existing problem with plastics already in the ocean. 80% of seabirds and 100% of sea turtles that have been examined had plastic in their stomachs. They eat it, thinking it's food. They derive no nutrition, of course. For many, it fills up their stomachs, it can't be excreted, and they die. Albatross colonies contain many empty nests containing the bones and feathers of dead young birds in a pool of plastic that was once in their stomachs. Microplastics too have increasingly come under the spotlight as these tiny fragments also damage sea life. They are now entering the human food chain too through fish and water, plastics and water we discussed last week. So what about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Can we clean it up? There have been many ideas and schemes to do this. One of the best known is from Dutch entrepreneur Boyan Slat, who invented a system of 100-kilometre floating barriers and an underwater screen to extract the plastic. The idea that makes Slat's concept different is the principle of letting the sea do the work, by having the ocean currents run V-shaped screens that filter out small plastics. When the system is fully operational, the plastics can then be loaded onto small vessels and taken back to land for recycling. Today, the Ocean Cleanup Foundation employs more than 70 people and has around $30 million in funding. That's around £23 million, most of it from Silicon Valley. Recent trials in the North Sea with a prototype, officially named Boomy McBoomface after the boom that supports the filtering screens, were promising enough for the team to press ahead with a plan to pilot the system in the Pacific Gyre this year. The goal then is to move on to the 4 other ocean gyres and replicate the process, albeit with slightly less rubbish to deal with in each vortex. However, some scientists think that ocean plastic collectors might end up collecting more Silicon Valley money than marine plastic. Some argue that only 3% of plastic is floating at the surface, with the rest thought to be either at the bottom of the sea floor or suspended in the water column. They say the money could be better spent on waste management or recycling. The argument goes that if the sink is overflowing, you turn off the taps before you clean up the water. A recent study by Imperial College London compared 2 hypothetical methods of collecting marine plastic over a 10-year period between 2015 and 2025. Either by skimming the waste from the middle of the ocean or by positioning the collecting booms just off the coast near densely populated areas. Computer modelling suggests that placing collecting devices nearer coasts would remove about 31% of microplastics, but when all the collecting booms are placed inside the circulating mid-ocean garbage patches, only 17% of microplastics would be removed. Most NGOs and government agencies agree that we have to work upstream, catching plastic in rivers before it enters the ocean. Otherwise, the debris is going to shred and sink to the bottom where it's unreachable. But there are other successful ocean cleanup devices already out there as a proof of concept, such as the Sea Bin in Australia, a floating rubbish bin placed in marinas, docks and ports. The water is sucked from the surface and passes through a catch bag with a submersible water pump. These bins collect an estimated 1.5 kilograms of floating debris per day. Booms off the coast of cities are a great idea, but surely any project that removes some of the mountain of existing plastic out of the ocean has to be a good thing. It's not really an either-or deal. There is an increasing awareness of the problem of marine plastics here on land, with commercial interests running their own projects. Dell is about to create laptop packaging materials recycled from litter found on Haitian beaches. The company estimates that it will keep 16,000 pounds of plastic out of the ocean. Designer Stella McCartney announced this year that she will use ocean plastic in lieu of woven or recycled polyester in some of her products. She has previously worked with Adidas to create a sneaker made with materials recovered from the sea. Indeed, Adidas's long-standing collaboration with Parley for the Oceans has seen them create a collection of swimwear made from upcycled fishing nets and debris, as well as trainers with uppers made from recycled plastic recovered from the sea. I have a bag I use for my shopping that's been made from recycled bottles. It works fine. In fact, I've had it for about, 10 years now. Even Pharrell Williams worked with a Dutch fashion brand G-Star Raw on a denim collection made from plastic waste. Among the other solutions to dealing with ocean plastics is the Waste to Wear initiative run by the NGO Healthy Seas. This project reworks the nylon found in abandoned fishing nets into textiles for use in clothing. Fishing gear makes up about half of the macro debris in the Pacific Gyres. A focused effort on the loss of fishing gear in the global oceans has got to be a critical part of this strategy. Lost fishing gear is something that Raw Oceans will focus on next week. In the UK alone, the amount of single-use plastic wasted every year would fill 1,000 Royal Albert Halls, but awareness of the problem is rising. The BBC will ban all single-use plastics used by the corporation by 2020. Scotland plans to ban plastic straws by the end of 2019. The British government has launched a 25-year environment plan which sets out to eliminate all avoidable plastic waste by the end of 2042. But is there anything we ordinary people can do to solve the marine plastic problem? We can be aware of the choices we make in our everyday lives and reduce the amount of single-use plastic we use. Personally, I carry my own coffee cup in my bag, even my own wooden food utensils in a pouch. They're light and I don't notice they're there. I also carry foldable shopping bags with me. I take them everywhere because sometimes you end up shopping when you didn't plan to when you left the house. And does anybody really need a drinking straw? If you can't live without them, then maybe look at stainless steel options on Amazon. They come with cleaning brushes and are quite hygienic. There are lots of small actions we can take to reduce our consumption and waste of single-use plastics. To sum up then, about 8 million tonnes of plastic debris is washed into the oceans each year, where it's broken down into smaller microplastics that act as a magnet for chemical toxins ingested by zooplankton, which then enters the entire food web and back to us humans in our food and drink. The cumulative amount of plastic in the ocean is set to increase tenfold by 2020, with the consequences extending centuries into the future because of the length of time it takes for plastics to biodegrade. There are ambitious plans to gather the plastic waste circulating in the huge oceanic garbage patches, but what we really need is proper waste collection in densely populated coastlines, especially off China and Indonesia, where much of the plastic enters the sea. The so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a highly visible illustration of the scale of a global problem, one that can appear unsurmountable, but one which we can each play a very real part in reducing. That's it from Raw Oceans this week. I'm Jules Powers. I'll be back next week and we'll be looking at fishing gear.